Hi Pisces, welcome to your July 2019 Astro Update. It's Raina here. I'm sorry that I didn't do your reading. I thought that I had done all the readings. And thank you to the person who wrote and had a little frowny face because once again, Pisces has been overlooked. Now, I usually do your readings as one of the first ones, I think. And so I'm kind of surprised that it was overlooked because I think, since I do several series of readings every month, I might have confused it with the last series. So I've compiled a list of the houses that these transits are going to primarily be going through, and it looks like for you it's the 5th and the 6th houses. So the 5th house is the house of romance, the house of creativity, including creating children. So it's the house of conceiving children and children in general. So even if you're if you work in a daycare or early childhood program, then it would probably be germane to your situation. And it's the house of the business that you own. And it's also the house of pleasure. So it's a house of fun. But when we talk about creative pursuits, it can also be your actual entrepreneurial goings on. And then the 6th house is the house of work, service to others, and health matters. It can be your physical work place, environment, your coworkers. It can be pets. And it can be, there was something, your daily routine, which basically means how you organize your time on a daily basis. Now, that might seem like kind of a weird thing to mention, but it's incredibly important if you are somebody who is working from home for perhaps the first time in your life. And all of a sudden you have lost that external schedule that kind of keeps you on the straight and narrow, so to speak, because Pisces is ruled by the planet Neptune. And take it from somebody who has Neptune in the 6th house, as I do. If you don't have a kind of a mentality for structure, you can really fritter away a lot of time. And, doing this or doing that because you don't have to answer to anybody, right? When you're working for yourself. But then the flip side of that is that you lose productivity. So having a sense of order and having that kind of routine can be quite helpful, even if it doesn't come naturally to you. As a matter of fact, if it doesn't come naturally to you, that's an even better reason to do it. So that actually can be very important for you, depending on what your work circumstances are like. So the month starts out with Mars, the planet that kind of prods us and pushes us towards our accomplishments or future accomplishments and, kicks us into high gear, going into a fire sign, Leo, which happens to be that 6th house for you. So this can be a very fiery start to your month in a very practical area. So for some Pisces people, you may simply be working overtime, working another job, for whatever reason. Maybe it's temporary. Mars can be conflict, so there could be a conflict with coworkers, some kind of a beef in the office, and maybe usually I think of coworkers, but any kind of conflict in the workplace that has to do maybe even with your salary or something along those lines. But it can simply be that you are just working even more. There's a kind of a physicality with Mars. And so there's kind of a vigorous energy. On the 2nd, there's that solar eclipse that we are looking towards, or I was going to say looking forward to, but that we are anticipating. Maybe that's the best way of putting it. At 10 degrees of Cancer, Cancer is a fellow water sign. So this is particularly good for you. And this is going to be your 5th house of love. Now, this is the other area besides the 6th house that's really emphasized. Solar eclipse in the 5th can mean that if you're single and looking, that it really opens up for you, that there are maybe multiple opportunities. You know, a solar eclipse is a powerful new moon. So this particular new moon is like tripled in its power and reach. And so speaking of reach, I mean, even in June, some of you may notice that this area of life is lighting up for you, and past that July 2nd date as well. And this is great for creative people, for artists, you know, kind of like getting into a very prolific creative period. And if you are, I mean, this is the 5th house, so if you don't want to get pregnant, you know, be careful about that, because that could come about with greater ease. And water signs, I think I read somewhere that water signs are more fertile than other signs, and I believe it. I believe it. So on the 3rd, we have Venus going into Cancer, and again, that's the 5th house, and Venus is associated with love as well as our art. So for creative people as well as lovers, this is a romantic energy, and just the aesthetics are on point. And Venus can also indicate money, attracting money in the area of art and the area of your business, if you have a business. One thing I think I touched upon in the intro is that that the 5th house can be about pleasure. And so whether it's parties or concerts or sporting events, which we don't, like even competitive things can be associated with this. And you've had Mars in that house back in June. So now it's in a more business-like area. But just the fun of it, the fun in games, games can be 5th house. And so Venus there, it really makes you just want to have fun. I wanted to say girls just want to have fun, but, there are going to be guys watching or listening to this too. So I want to keep it gender neutral, people, gender neutral. Okay, on the 7th, Mercury goes retrograde at 4 degrees of Leo, and that's your 6th house. So Mercury retrograde, we know that there can be snafus with the area of any kind of contracts. Mercury rules contracts. Now, one thing that you have to know is that Mercury rules the 6th house as well as the 3rd house. In the 6th, it rules Virgo. Okay, and so Mercury in the 6th house is about diet, and so you may be rethinking a diet. Maybe you're going back with some of your literature, and perhaps you had a way that you used to eat that yielded great results, and you went off of it, and now you're kind of reviewing it. It's a funny thing. I read one time that it's actually a great time to go on a diet when Mercury is retrograde. And one of the reasons they probably meant that is because Mercury does rule diet in the 6th. But I think they also were talking about the flexibility that can happen where you redo something, like it's okay to redo it because you're kind of like improvising as you go along. This can be like some kind of miscommunication that happens in the workplace. And remember that Mars is there. So Mars can get quite heated, and then you have this communication breakdown, possibly. Remember, this is all just possible. And if there was, like, let's say maybe Mars in this house is you competing with coworkers to get a promotion. And then there's some kind of a communication breakdown. Maybe the boss thinks that you said something that you didn't or what have you. And then there's a little bit of a problem, a confusion there. On the 16th, we have the lunar eclipse. So we had the solar eclipse and we have the lunar eclipse in the opposite sign of Capricorn. 25 degrees of Capricorn. And this is an earth energy, which is compatible or a great angle to you, a sextile, in the 11th house of hopes and wishes. Now, lunar eclipse is a powerful full moon. So, full moons in general can bring things to culmination. In the case of lunar eclipses, to me, it's like a runaway train where things are ushered out of somebody's life because change is afoot and it's time for change. But there's also the possibility that, this is coming from an inner landscape, if you will. So you're, in the 11th house, this could be emotionally you realizing what is at stake here, in your juncture of this life's journey, Pisces. And something may come about. And again, this may be connected to work where you realize that you have dreams that you want to have come true and that maybe you haven't realized yet. And, the 11th house is considered the luckiest house by at least one individual that I was connected to. I mean, through reading about it. And that goes along with the idea of hopes and wishes, because we do have to have that kind of faith. We can't be cynical in life and think that just because something hasn't happened to us in this moment that it's not possible. But I think sometimes people are a little bit too passive and they just want it to be like in the movies where it's like a fairy godmother coming along and, handing it over. So maybe you have a profound realization of what exactly you need to do to manifest those dreams. And there could be like great shakeups with your circle of friends. The 11th house is that as well as group associations. The 11th house is a collective. And for Pisces, the people around you are very important because you tend to be very influenced by the people that you surround yourself with. But even Pisces can have a moment of clarity and realize if someone or some people are simply not serving you. And this may be that, aha moment for you in a huge way. And you just kind of like allow yourself or allow this eclipse to kind of cut ties that are long overdue, perhaps. On the 22nd, the sun goes into Leo, and that's the 6th house, and that makes you more, detail-oriented, at least wanting that sort of, kind of trying to embody that. There may be a reason for this. Remember that Mars is in that sector. So you may be, if you're still on the job at a place that, you thought you were going to get a promotion. Maybe you misunderstood yourself, and that was part of the problem. You may be trying to, impress somebody by your actions and by your attitude. And the sun in this 6th house is really a great way to do it because, it's like you're morphing into a Virgo temporarily. The sun also has a healing influence, and that can, generate positivity within the workplace. And it's great for your health as well if you've been experiencing anything to the contrary of that. On the 27th, Venus goes into Leo in that 6th house, and Venus can bring money. So maybe that's what all the fuss was about. Maybe you wanted a raise and you felt like it wasn't fair how you were being treated. Now, Venus can also just restore harmony. Mars is still there, but maybe Mars has been kind of cut down to size or pacified by Venus. Who knows? But Mars isn't a bad influence. Mars gives us energy. And, with 6th house matters, this can actually be, I didn't mention this, but this can be great for your health if you are getting into exercise. And maybe you're just in the move to move your body more than you usually do. You could, with Venus in the 6th house, you can meet a potential romantic partner through your work. On the 31st, Mercury turns direct at 23 degrees of Cancer. So during this Mercury retrograde for that 3.5 week period, Mercury actually dipped back into the 5th house. And that's why I think that perhaps maybe even some of you are doing your own personal business on the side. Maybe you have a business that you're trying to launch or that you're preparing to launch. And maybe that's why you've been working so hard, because you're trying to do 2 things at once. And with Mercury going back into the 5th house, you might be saying to yourself, I wonder if I should just quit this day job altogether. And you might have to crunch the numbers because maybe you can't make it on your own business just by itself. So you might have to just continue for a while longer. But something gets resolved. And by the way, just to let you know, when Mercury goes retrograde, all of us can hear from people from our past. But when you, or people that we haven't heard from for a while, but when it goes back into your 5th house, this could be like an old lover. On the same day, and like I said, this is the 31st of July, the same day, there's a new moon at 8 degrees of Leo in that 6th house. So there could be some new direction with the work that you're doing. Maybe if you have a conflict, you ask to be transferred to a new department, so you don't have to see a particular person, and that restores the harmony that Venus promises on the 27th. But yeah, so this is a new direction in some way. Maybe you do get a raise or a promotion. The other thing, too, that I wanted to state is that this is the second new moon of the month. So that's another reason that July is so significant, is that not only are there eclipses happening, but there are 2 new moons. So a lot of change, a lot of new beginnings, but a Mercury retrograde in between, which, of course, can cause looking back, And we do have some other planets that are still retrograding. We have Saturn, we have Jupiter. These are not personal planets, but they still can, affect things. Pluto is retrograde. I don't know which other ones, but that's enough, I think, So I like whenever Mercury goes direct on the same day that there's a new moon. For some reason, that always makes it seem like it's an even greater forward movement. Okay, Pisces, that's what I have for you. If you'd like a personal reading, the link is below. Otherwise, have a great July. Take care. Bye.